Health is defined not by the absence of disease. That's number one. Health is actually defined in the definition, I'm paraphrasing here, but looks at a spiritual, a physical, a psychological, holistic aspect, and more importantly, it's how the body functions and heals. So what is the speed, or what is the efficiency that the body can return back to homeostasis?
What your expertise is and what physical health has played, like how it's played a part in your life.
Well, my name is Josh Holden. I live in New Braunfels, Texas. My profession, I'm a salesman. I sell biologics to surgeons. And, I've been involved in physical fitness for a long time. I played Division I football and baseball at West Point and kind of stumbled onto sort of different fitness modalities. And I feel like I've sort of come through the other side and have some distilled insights in terms of how to optimize, your life. I have some thoughts on that, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Well, and I'll just say, I probably know of better athletes than Josh, like Bo Jackson maybe. But in my life, Josh might have been the best athlete that I've ever played with. So like he says he was an athlete. He was an extraordinary athlete. All right, Robbie.
Was. Definitely.
Well, thanks, everybody. It's an honor to be here with you guys. My name is Robbie Kamadi-Reddy. I'm CEO and founder of a health longevity consumer startup called Daytona Health. I'm an internal medicine trained physician by training, also trained in digital health and AI and wearables and all those cool things that are out there. It's funny, physical fitness for me, I've been through the ringer and the roller coaster. So I haven't always been healthy and fit. I've been, obese and fat and gone through the journey several times over, and I've really learned a lot each time, and now kind of stabilized in a track and a routine and a new mindset that I've used that's been really helpful. So I can very much looking forward to empathize with people who've been through that.
A lot of doctors struggle.
Absolutely.
I mean, on the outside looking in, you're like, well, you got all the knowledge, or we think you got all the knowledge, but the lifestyle's tough, right?
Well, I think that's one of the main things I want to highlight today, right, is that the knowledge itself is just not sufficient for most people. You really need the extra step, persuasion and accountability.
Amazing. Peter
Martinez, chiropractic physician, CEO of a company that's now moving to corporate wellness. I was in emergency medicine prior to this as paramedic and critical care, and whole family's medical doctors, and I got really frustrated with their healthcare system, which led me down the path I am now. I feel like I've seen a decent amount of both sides of what you might call healthcare. It's debatable which one is actually healthcare. And right now I get to help people put healing in the right order. So we start primarily with the nervous system. The right order is our opinion and bias as chiropractors. But we focus a lot on dysautonomia and sympathetic dominance first, and then we move into more of the functional aspects. Gut, nutrition, toxicity, etc. Really excited. We really want to have a big impact on how Americans view and manage their health so that they can get back to doing what they love to do, what they're called to do. And I'm hoping that through having an impact on some of these Austin companies that have a voice on the world stage, we'll be able to get it done.
Well, so this first, and we'll start with you, Peter, proactive health versus reactive health. Honestly, I didn't know that until I met some of you guys. Real quick, can you define like what proactive health is for you and your practice versus a reactive health kind of mindset?
I think we can start with defining health. Right?
Yeah, fair enough.
If we were to all ask 100 people, how would you define health? I'd probably get maybe 70 answers. Maybe 100.
That's a great point. There's a lot of ways you can define it.
So the World Health Organization, questionable organization maybe at some point over the last years, how they manage things, but the medical textbooks, Grey's Anatomy, not the TV show. When you look at the definitions across the board, regardless of what you would consider a reputable source, there is a lot of agreement that health is not how you feel. It's not whether you currently have a disease process. It's not whether you have a headache in that moment or you have some inflammation that's leading to, high blood pressure. Health is defined not by the absence of disease. That's number one. Health is actually defined in the definition, I'm paraphrasing here, but looks at a spiritual, a physical, a psychological, holistic aspect, and more importantly, it's how the body functions and heals. So what is the speed or what is the efficiency that the body can return back to homeostasis or baseline, right? How fast can a body go from a non-homeostatic state or like a fight or flight response, deal with a threat, and then return back to recovery state? And if there is an inefficiency or disruption, the ability to return back to an optimal homeostatic state or normal function, then and if that stays in the body, then disease begins to build. So I would say health is not how you feel, it's how you heal and function, right?
Yeah.
And so if you underline the first 4 letters of the word health, that's a good reminder of what health is. It's how you heal, not feel.
It's good. Anything to add to that? Just health? Definition of health?
I think actually a step further even. Peter, I think it's great. Yeah, it's great. A great way to explain it. I think I look at people and I think like our healthcare system being proactive or reactive. Like right now, we wait till people get sick until you're out of this homeostasis. Then we go and intervene. And the truth is, a lot of these diseases that we're worried about that are killing us and bankrupting us are all preventable mostly. And even if you have them, they're reversible. So there are things that you can do to not only reverse these conditions, but to put you in a situation where you're basically building an Iron Man suit of armor around you, like vaccinating yourself against cardiometabolic disease. Yeah. And a lot of them have to do with lifestyle. Some of them have to do with supplements and meds in some cases. And it's like taking those steps now is, for some people, a minority of people, like athletes, for example, love to see you guys, like, I give you a plan and you just execute, right? Yeah. It's like you will execute every bullet point, and even if that means you waking up at 4:30 in the morning. That's definitely not me, right? Like that's like 90% of us. Like we talk ourselves out of it. You know, we bias ourselves. We're busy. We put friction because it's like we don't like to deal with discomfort. And so it's like fixing those mindset issues is going to help us take the actions, which in turn is going to help us be proactive and not get sick in the first place. Get to that optimal state of homeostasis. One other thing I'll add though is, it's like one thing I've noticed is I think health is an interesting word. Health. What's funny is I'm out of healthcare and health really. Like I'm into health span now. That's like my guiding North Star. And health span, we in the company have come to think about it as like 3 buckets. One is like avoiding these diseases and getting better recovery, like these cardiometabolic diseases like diabetes, cancer, stroke. These are all related. Heart disease, obesity. And the medical system has become so hyper specialized. You have like doctors who work, like you have ophthalmologists who just do like separate parts of the eye, you know? And they don't really talk to each other, the other docs, right? When you look at the root cause, that's what you have to start doing, like this functional aspect. If you hear the word functional, and like when medical people are talking about it, that's what they mean. It's like looking at the root cause of these lifestyle errors. So that's one bucket. It's like these diseases, we want to like avoid them, reverse them, and like just steer around them. Yeah. Second, it's like work performance, like just mental acuity, the cognitive abilities. We spend like 90,000 hours of our lives at work. It's the cause of most stress, where we spend most of our time. You know, it's like our purpose and mission. And like we all want to do that and be better, but not burn out. Like that's a big problem. And the third thing under kind of the health span, paradigm that I'm talking about is nurturing spending time with the things you care about the most, which are your friends and family, which directly correlated in like many studies to longevity. Like you will live longer and live longer well when you're spending time with those people, but then able to balance your other responsibilities too, again, without burning out. So those are like how I would define like health span. And I think that's what we all really want, isn't it? But like healthcare does none of those things.
No, I mean, it's funny to hear you guys talk. I have my definition for leadership. I have my definition of wealth. Don't know that I had my definition for health coming in here. But if I were to say it simply, just like the regular guy here, my definition of wealth is tied to freedom. I think my definition of health is probably tied to freedom too. And then I would say that in my last couple of years of life, I've really sought to protect my brain. Like really try to learn, what are the things that I can do that protect my brain health, just so I can be sharp. And part of that is all the other things too, right? I mean,
I know the intention for some of this conversation is really, what does health look like for a leader? And I'm really excited about this conversation actually, because I think instead of going, we could go a lot of different directions in the sphere of health. Working with the average American, you could say, can be very frustrating because we're trying to pull them out of a sick care model or sick care system. I don't think it's healthcare. I think it's disease management, and it is siloed. It is isolated. It is very frustrating, and sounds like you and I probably work in similar spaces with that. The joy of working with a high-level athlete like Josh or a high-level leader like all these people is we're after optimal performance, because we don't want interference. We don't want obstruction, roadblocks to our performance as a leader. And I think leaders and athletes share that in common. And so it's really fun as a provider working with someone that's saying, hey, I don't want to wait till the engine blows up. My body's the Ferrari, the Porsche. I'm bringing it in. I'm going to fine tune it. Let me know what I need to do. I want to function and heal optimally. I'm excited for this. And my preference would be to dive into maybe asking Josh, like, sorry, I know you're asking questions.
No, you're good, man.
Setting the stage, I just see so many similarities. Like, what could a leader take away from, like, the routines or the diligence or the perspective of an athlete when it comes to their health? And so I guess my question is, do you have a mindset that has shifted over the years from training versus what keeps you motivated?
That's a great question. And I think over time that what you've asked has evolved in my mind. Right, because I've tried many different modalities, so CrossFit, P90X, F45. I mean, keep going down the list, right? All these things are effective, but I think what I've sort of realized over the years is that physical strength is the most important thing that you can have. And the reason I say that is because a happy person is going to be strong physically. A weak person most of the time is going to be unhappy, right? And, people will elevate the intellectual and the spiritual, which I understand. But it's also instructive to see those intellectual and spiritual people when they increase their back squat. And I think that's a controversial statement, but I also think that, our physical strength, dictates our quality of life.
Josh, I wouldn't say that's controversial at all. I think there's a ton of data to support this. Like, we have tons of data to support what you just said. You're spot on. Yeah. I mean, exercise, especially resistance training, is highly correlated, as is muscle mass, with like lower mortality. I mean, I think one thing you said in the beginning, was talk about like physical health versus mental health. Can I offer a different way of looking at that? I think this is a weird distinction we made like in the 1800s, right, when psychology was starting to get along, right? Yeah. It's like, if you think about it, like everything that is your mind is, the origin point is your brain. And the brain is like a 3.5 pound like organ. It is an organ. And it's an organ just like everything else in your body, like a muscle or a digestive tract or skin cells or whatever. So like the same damage that is done to other organs when you're not exercising or eating well or eating too much sugar or, the bad diet and the like. It's weird to think like, it doesn't, those toxic effects of those bad behaviors don't stop at the neck down, right? Like they go to your brain too. So like your cognitive ability, the ability for you to go from like type 1 to type 2 thinking, like you use Daniel Kahneman's, like impulsive eating, like we're just doing things on impulse, impulse. You can stop, meditate, slow down, and especially in leadership positions, when you're in a difficult position, you can go, I'm going to detach. I'm going to look at this objectively. I'm going to have the confidence to move through it. I'm going to take it step by step. All those things that your people are looking for you to do, and set the example for. It comes from, this mindset and taking care of your body, because it does take care of your brain, which then is taking care of your mind. And I think the other thing I've just had is the gym is this weird microcosm of many challenges and like personal journey. It's like that last step that you do, when you're on the bench or something. I feel like that's like a lot of life outside the gym. It's like what makes people successful leaders is like they do that last rep. It's like if you could prove it to yourself in the gym, you could do it.
Yes, that's good.
Put maximum effort. It's the same thing. We're like, we should just stay up half an hour later and get these things done so that our presentation is just that A+ instead of an A, like the next day.
Robbie, that's great. And I think another thing that we forget is that humans are not physically normal in the absence of hard effort, right? And I think this audience can relate to that, because you're not listening to this podcast if you're not trying to get better. And I think what listeners want is just some things that they can kind of take away, right? And the thing that I'm gonna kind of harp on the next, as much as I'm speaking, is the importance and how we have forgotten how the barbell can get that physical strength that we're looking for. When I say the barbell, I'm talking about 5 specific lifts. I'm talking about the back squat, the deadlift, the press, the power clean, and the bench press.
Do other things. But I think those 2 things, along with, some specialized treatment and saying no to some other things, like that's totally brought my walking from the earth at an 8 to 10 in pain every single day, to the point where I can't sleep at night, to now I walk the earth at a 2, at a 1, in my back, because it's still injured, but it's but I've totally got it under control now.
And I'm glad you said that, Schuyler, because of those 5 lifts that I identified, the back squat, the deadlift, the press, the bench press, and the power clean, the back squat is number 1. The back squat is number 1A. The back squat is number 2, right? Yeah. And I say that because it recruits the most muscle fibers in the body by far. And, for men specifically, it's going to release the most testosterone of any lift that you're going to do. And then peeling back the layer on this, there is a correct way to do it. And, you can always tell people, oh, go back squat. The problem is that they don't know how. So there's layers to this, but.
Josh, can you talk about the importance of recovery here and like how you handle recovery? Hey, I'm overtraining and I need to really take it. What markers, what signals do you come up with?
Robbie, that's a really great question. And it's very dependent on your level of physical preparedness, right? So for me, I can handle probably much more than the average bear, right? So I can probably train harder and longer and more frequently than someone who doesn't train. That said, I know that I'm overtrained when I wake up and I'm really tired or I don't want to go to the gym. And it takes some pathos and some, tamping down the ego to say, okay, I'm tired. I don't want to go. I'm not going to go. I think people like us, we want to, push through and, hammer it. And, I don't feel like it, but I have to. And when you're emotionally drained and don't want to do something, that's actually your body telling you that I am overtrained. Robbie, does that kind of line up with what you're...
And just because I get these kind of questions all the time too, and I'm always curious on how athletes who are very high functioning like you do, just deal with that, because there's this fine line, right? Like we were talking about before we started recording, it's probably worth repeating about about this mind management. And so about this mind management, because I know that if people get in the right mindset, they will start to escalate their weights and their reps, and it's just, they're on the good downhill, right? But how would you deal with like pain versus soreness? Like when should people push through when they're just sore?
That's a great question.
But when they're like, oh man, this is starting to feel like if I do the squat again, I'm dangerous.
Well, we've brought up 2, I think, really important topics. I'll answer your first question first. Or your question first. The spine is critical to life, right? We have, it's the only organ system that has armor. And so we have structure around it, but we have a very mobile structure around it. And then we have really intricate, from fine, mostly neuro-driven muscles all the way out to things like our trapezius and rectors. And so whenever you're doing a back squat, or really when you're talking about training legs, the value of you training legs is stabilizing your spine. Like that's the best values you get out of it in your case with that injury. Fortunately, your legs are having to compensate a little bit from some structural damage that is in your lower back, right? I mean, that's why you're having to do that as much. But when your spine starts to fail, that's the input to the brain. And the input to the brain, whenever there's chaos going to the brain, it's instant stress for the body. It's instant cortisol. It's taking away your ability to remember things. It's moving your thoughts from the frontal cortex and the ability to critically think through things into your brainstem, and it's overloading your hippocampus, which is like really your amygdala is shooting your memory. And so whenever I'm not a fan of pushing past fatigue in the back and the spine, or any of the muscles that support the spine, and really could apply that to anywhere in the body. I think when you're tired, especially with some of those back lifts, you need to stop. Because if there's, and I would say the exception, and I do have the privilege and I have been able to work with some really high level, Olympic level athletes, and if we've done the assessment to know that there's 33 movable segments in your spine, for example, and they're all biomechanically optimally functioning, everything is perfect, then you can get away with pushing your body to the limit, because if those muscles relax and fatigue, you're going to be okay. If you have a biomechanical issue like a disc herniation or bulge or something like that, and then you're relying on your muscles to splint that injury, and then you fatigue those muscles, you've just taken away the cast that's protecting the neurology. So then you end up with radiculopathy, you end up with bladder issues, you end up with true pain. Soreness and pain, soreness is a recovery state, pain is injury. Pain is an alarm state. And that's kind of where I want to tie it into what you're saying, Josh, about waking up feeling tired the next day is one of the best tools I think people could walk away with in measuring their performance, recovery, and stress is heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is an incredible tool that helps you be able to optimize your health and let you know, are you living in a state of sympathetic dominance or fight or flight? Are you living like the lion is following you around all the time? When you go to war, when you get to the football field, when you get to the gym, you have to be able to get into that fight or flight state to perform. But if you stay there, it is impossible. It's physically impossible, physiologically impossible to eat, to sleep, to go to the bathroom,
That's good.
to heal.
That's really good.
Flight state, your body will not do it. It will prioritize the battlefield over healing and recovery. And so you have to know, and unfortunately many people in first world countries right now, we're living in what's called sympathetic dominance, or we have what's called dysautonomia, or an imbalance in our autonomic nervous system. So it's like you're driving with no brake pedal, kind of like a bit boat, It's like there's no brake pedal, it's all gas, and you cannot be an optimal leader, you cannot perform driving with all gas. And that leads to injuries, it leads to disease, and I think that's where leaders do need to be careful, because our mind, our intuition, or our DNA often is to all gas. We need to know that the gas will, like the car's going to wreck, it's going to explode if you don't know how to do it.
We're in a competitive environment, right? So like we're our peer group that we're competing against is not just our employees, right? It's like the people who are in other companies and other organizations and stuff like that. Yeah. One thing I'll add though that's been really exciting is that if you guys have wearables or use wearables, you'll see like a recovery metric. This algorithm, there's different ways to measure heart rate variability, spot on with that. And that metric has been evolving to be much more accurate with stuff that you can just use over the counter from Amazon. So things like the Apple Watch or like the Fitbit. So they're all starting to measure these things now. And so they'll have like a recovery score. And part of that recovery score is what they're measuring is heart rate variability. So for the Apple Watch, for example, which I'm wearing, you can go in and see your HRV. Now, is it perfect? No. Right? It's not as perfect as a clinical grade. I want to plug something here. There is a company in town, BioStrap, Samir Sonaki, an awesome entrepreneur who's got a clinical grade HRV. It's a new algorithm they're developing to get better at this. So we're going to see, we live in a world now, luckily, where we have access to tools like that we can buy for a couple $100 that'll give you data, HRV recovery, this was stuff like 20 years ago. You have to go into a formal lab to get tested and stuff with big clunky.
We do clinical grade HRV. It's the very first thing we do in our office.
So when we're talking about HRV, what are y'all's opinion? And I'm not talking about athletes that train specifically for endurance events. So triathletes, marathon runners, etc. But what do you guys think about the difference between training for cardiovascular health versus strength training?
Well, heart rate variability, I think we should talk about what that is for a second. It's worth spending a second on this because it's so valuable for leaders. It's such a valuable tool, and there's so much research coming out about it, and really has been out about it, but now we can utilize it. So heart rate variability is less to do with the heart. It's not. We're not looking at the firing of the electricity from like the atrium to the ventricle. We're not looking at like an EKG pattern. What we're really looking at is the autonomic nervous system's control over the heart. So if we are running or in battle or working out, our heart rate, yes, the contraction of the ventricles will raise to 80, 120, whatever it is, but it will become very steady and very predictable, very rhythmic, right? If we're having a conversation, we're drinking, we're eating, we're going to the bathroom, our HRV, our heart rate variability should be very variable. It should change a lot. It should speed up a little bit, it should calm down a little bit, it should be steady for a second. It needs to be adaptable. It needs to change based on whatever we're asking our body to do. And so a more variable heart rate or a high variability, a higher heart is going to mean that person in that moment is in a more parasympathetic state or a rest and digest state, meaning their body is in a recovery state. It can eat, sleep, poop, focus, and we should really be in that in the majority of our life. If the heart rate variability becomes more consistent, more rhythmic, more steady, that tends to show us that the autonomic nervous system is in more of a sympathetic driven kind of fight the bear, lift the weights, fight on the battlefield state. Both are important. We need to have that flexibility. But again, if we go back to the original homeostasis conversation, you need to be able to get into that state and get out. You also don't want to stay stuck with a very high HRV and not be able to get that drive to be able to accomplish what you need to do, because you got to be able to run from the bear when the bear's there. But if there's a lion in the bathroom, you're going to have GI issues. If there's a lion in the bedroom, you're not going to sleep. If there's a lion on the couch and you're trying to recover from something, you're going to struggle. And so I think many people come to our office that have even have a lot of experience in the functional medicine space. The traditional medical model has failed them, and we do this clinical grade HRV initially, and they're just stuck in a stress state. And I think for me, number one is if I can help break that fight or flight cycle, all of a sudden their body starts doing what it's been trying to do for a long time.
So your question about strength training, and so this is really interesting. There's a lot of data coming up on the last 10 years about this.
Yep.
In terms, so everyone's busy. Most people most employers are busy, leaders especially are busy. You got a lot on your shoulders. So you have limited time, and you're trying to decide. Let's say you're the kind of person you've already decided. I'm going to make this a priority. Whatever it is, I've got this many hours a week. I will not skip it. I'll do it. So what do you choose to do during that?
That's a great question.
Right? Like, and it's like, some days you're just like, I just don't know if I can go on this run or whatever. Like, if you have a choice between running and resistance training, like weightlifting, always choose resistance training. See, sarcopenia, you ever heard that term?
No.
So sarcopenia is a term I want everyone to be familiar with. It is a killer. It is a loss of muscle mass. It's an abnormal, low muscle mass. And one of the there's so many myths about health and health span and longevity, right? One of the myths that a lot of people have is that, when you get older, you just kind of get smaller and weaker, and disease just is part of life. You look at tribal societies, like there's been several studies now in several tribal societies. There's 80-year-old guys, 75-year-old guys doing farmer carries, from water from the well back to their camp. It's like they're lean, they've got muscle mass, they're still very active and functional. So this whole Western world thing, where we just see our elderly just get into little wheelchairs and go around Walmart, like that's not normal. Like the body's killed a lot more. So helping to get into that stay in that functional state is resistance training.
And I couldn't agree more, Robbie. And I think the reason is because if you look at a triathlete, a strength training program for a triathlete is going to benefit him in his endurance training, right? But it doesn't work the other way around, right? So him doing more endurance training is not going to help him be stronger.
Gabrielle Lyons is a great, it's a physician who talks about this a lot. If you look up her podcasts and lectures, and she's around Austin every once in a while, giving talks. But it's having more muscle mass isn't just about like showing off and looking good, and also protecting yourself from injury. Like you get in an accident. Kevin Hart talks about this when he got in that car accident. He's like, man, if I wasn't working out every day, strength training my back, and just getting a muscular frame that was helping me, vaccinate myself from serious injury, it would have been a lot worse. But it's not just that, but it's like, remember, muscle's metabolically active, right? Like, and the body's very parsimonious. Like, it doesn't like to keep things around that's not being used. So if you use muscle, like you don't load yourself. They'll be like, wow, why are we feeding this thing? And it'll lose muscle. And when it does take on, when you are feeding muscle, you are protecting yourself from cardiometabolic disease. Your insulin resistance goes down. And remember, insulin resistance is one of the root causes of all of these problems.
So if we're talking to a very driven, let's say we're talking to Josh, very driven, active, executive, leader, already has the muscle or the weight training thing down. Well, we also know about stress and metabolism and cortisol. So if Josh is not giving his body time to heal and to recover, or he's dealing with, let's say your sales have just been terrible this quarter, and maybe there's some relational issues and a big tax bill, and your body's loaded with maybe a bunch of toxins from whatever, maybe things you couldn't even control.
Sure.
And then your outlet is working out in the gym and you're eating enough, but what we know is hormonally, going back to a little bit of the HRV conversation, if the line doesn't stay at work or stay in the gym and it comes home with you, we know that cortisol eventually, after it's really wreaking havoc on your pancreas, is going to start breaking down muscle. And so there can be this vicious cycle of feeling like you constantly need to build muscle at the same time as your body is depleting it. And I'm not, there's the severe end of that spectrum with pathologies, but there's also this vicious cycle. And I think it's really important to, as leaders, we tend not to have an issue being driven. We tend to have an issue not knowing how to recover.
Well, I just to try to get more practical with it, because I'm sitting here trying to learn from all three of you. First off, that I will say, because you mentioned accountability really early in this, and that, and then we jumped right on Josh and said, mentally, how do you do this every day? Coming from a person who is highly accountable, mainly because of habit. Like this morning, I woke up tired. Okay, now I didn't go sling weights around for 50 minutes or an hour, but because I just refuse to lose momentum. I think momentum in business and sales and exercise, like I
That's
think
the power event,
Yeah.
the consistency piece.
so momentum matters so much to me that I did, instead of going into the gym and lifting weights, I did, and I usually put my tennis shoes on. So if I drop a weight, my feet are protected. Instead of doing that today, I just went out into the front yard with just my bare feet, and I just moved my body. And it was probably funny for all my neighbors, but I have a little routine that if I have 15 minutes to move my body, then it's still a check block, which for me matters for momentum, just a normal person. So I just want to acknowledge that. Like, I do think for habit-driven people, continuing momentum is important, just even if it's psychology. But I do want, like, recovery. Like, what's a practical, like, all right, I need to recover. What do you do? I mean, rest probably is one thing, but like, what is it? Like, if I need to get the bear out of the room, like, what do I do?
So I can speak to that practically, right? I focus on these 5 barbell movements: the back squat, the deadlift, the press, the bench press, and the power clean. And the way that I sort of structure it is 3 days a week. I have a volume day, I have a recovery day, and I have an intensity day. Okay. So the volume day is 5 sets of 5 of a couple of those movements. The recovery day is 5 sets of 3 of a combination of those movements with a lighter load. And then the intensity day, I have 1 set, 5 reps, and I'm going. And I'm adding 5 pounds per week to each of those days. And that's a very simple way to, for someone who is used to this kind of training, to recover and make sure that we're not overtraining.
So the 3 days in the middle there, you're either doing nothing or you're doing lighter.
Well, so another great question. For someone that is not used to this kind of training, I would say take Tuesday, Thursday off and go for a walk, go play a sport, go do something else that's sub-maximal, right? For me, I do Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'll do some kind of a high intensity kind of just to get my heart rate going. And that's kind of my active rest.
So there's something you said there about this, and that sounds like a really good plan. Like I'm actually a little surprised. I thought you'd say you do more. Like you're not sitting there killing it every day, because that would be the recovery.
I want to be out in an hour, and I want to. And we all have genetically programmed potential, right? So everyone has a marker that they can hit, and that's as high as they can go. And what I've found is the barbell is the most effective way to, climb up to that potential.
I think that 60-minute mark is a really good mark, right? Because you see a lot of people in the gym like, and they brag about it. They're like, I've been in there for 3 hours. I'm like, you've been in there working for like 30 minutes and on your phone for the rest of the day.
Now, I will say that the volume day will take probably an hour and a half. But the intensity day takes about 20 minutes.
So I think that the larger point is just being very efficient with your time. And they're like, when you're in the gym to lift weights, you go in, lift the weights, and get out. You should be out in an hour. And I see a lot of people just wasting time walking around, texting people back, setting up their tripod cameras for Instagram reels. And that can be important, for your brand and things like that. But it's just like, I don't have much time like that.
And I love that approach, because it applies to our life as leaders too, right? I want to have very focused, very, that my attention is on this thing, on this very important thing. And it's this. And so for me, on the intensity day and on the back squat, I think this week I have 435 pounds that I have to do. And so, it's building up to that point where, hey, this is a siege mentality. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to do that 1 set. I'm going to do it. And then the next week I'm adding 5 pounds. And then the next week I'm adding 5 pounds. Now, I'm not doing that indefinitely, but there's a certain block of time. I think I'm going to do it for 12 weeks, and then I'm going to back off. But, all is to say there's a plan.
If I would say, to your point, the psychology, I think this is a really overlooked piece. And there's a lot to talk about here, but this is kind of what my company does. Like we really get into the health coaching and the psychology. I'm sure you do as well. And mindset is so important. It is the bedrock of this. Right? Yeah. So you look at someone like Josh, you look at someone who's just starting their health journey, has never been exposed to that level of intensity of working out or training. Actually, we don't use the word workout in our company because it has the word work in it. Mm-hmm. And that's to my larger point, which is the way you say things, the way you program yourself makes a huge difference.
I couldn't agree with that more.
What we've noticed is when people stick with us for like a year, like the first year, when we're health coaching them, it takes about 5 months and you see a definite flip in their mindset, and you see it in the way they speak. So in the beginning, it's like, I got to go work out today. And then later, 5 months later, like, I'm the kind of person who trains every day. So it's like,
Love that.
It's like you got to flip this thing from something that causes friction to something advantageous for you. Like, being in San Diego, like friends who were Navy SEALs, and we're in line once, like at Thanksgiving or something like that, trying to get food, like last minute, like huge line. I'm like sitting there complaining, and my friend's like, "What a great opportunity to practice patience." And I'm like, "That's why you're a Navy SEAL."
And so that's such an interesting point about the positive self-talk. Do you guys know who Brian Tracy is? I know you do. Okay, so I like to listen to he has a book called The Psychology of Sales. And it's really, really, it's if there's a new salesman starting out, that's the podcast or the book I would have them read. And Brian Tracy says that for a salesperson, before they go into a sales call, the thing that they can do to increase their positive self-worth is to repeat them to themselves. I like myself. 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 And it sounds really silly and archaic.
It's not. I mean, I think it's like because there's so many different routines and combinations of the days and what exercises, right? But the one common denominator about people like him, right, and people who are not getting that, it's like you could see it when you coach people. It's like in your example as well. It wasn't really habit. It wasn't just habit. That was intention. Like you had to think it through that day. Habits on automaticity. Like you shouldn't be thinking about it, right? Like the things we do like that. Habits only make up, Schuyler, about 40% of what we do. We like to say everything's a habit, but it's not. You have to kind of do the habits. You have to get the willpower. You have to hone that muscle as well. You have to create a community around you that's going to help you. Maybe coaching to help with accountability. Putting less friction. Like the night before I have to go train the next day, I put my shoes and socks,
Love that.
Workout clothes.
Love
because my brain, when I wake up, is looking for the excuse, and I'm just looking for the excuse not to go to the gym. Like all of us are.
It's so funny you say that because Marcus Aurelius used to talk about him not wanting to get out of bed because it was warm and he didn't want to get cold, right? So if you put your clothes next to you, you just grab your clothes, put them on, you're not cold.
So it's like my brain could be like, oh, where are my shoes? Well, I can't find them, so I guess I'm not going to go to the gym today. But it's even though I know it'll only take 30 seconds to find them, but if they're right there, I'm like, that's a friction point that's not friction anymore. So you're kind of arranging your environment in ways to make the things that you know that are good for you easier, and the things that you know are bad for you harder. Like put the M&Ms in an opaque container.
You're a James Clear fan, aren't you?
I mean, these things they all add up to like this lifestyle, and you end up getting to the state where people are talking to themselves differently. Because the locus of control, it's agency. It's like the person who's 300 pounds and is thinking, nothing I do works. I can't, my body's just like this. And they kind of have this rigmarole of reasons. And you have to flip those and help them see like, no, you got to reinvent yourself.
That's so important to somebody that's been given a diagnosis. And we see it a lot clinically. Like I hear my diabetes, my migraine headache, and they take ownership of it. They think they can have it for the rest of their life. They've never had somebody like in your company or in our office that's said, hey, like one of the first things I say is stop calling them your headaches. If you want to get rid of it, say the headache.
Oh, that's good.
Diabetes, and let's start. And we start with mindset is one of our core 5 essentials, and mindset is critical. Going to circle back to recovery and how we loop that in just with 3 simple things. I look at physical, chemical, and emotional stressors, right? Those are really 3 reasons the body isn't healing, and healing and recovery often can be synonymous. Like, are you addressing, so we talked about, your weight routine, we talked about you checking in with yourself, but I think we've talked a lot about weight training and strength, but it's really important as a leader you're not going to recover if you're not addressing interferences to healing, which could be, we're starting to hit on the psychological component, which is huge, but physical, mental, and emotional stressors. Like you have to look at each 3 of them, and you have to be accountable, and you have to have accountability. You really need to test these things and have metrics for these things so that you're not guessing with them, because if you're not, you could have the best psychological routine, which honestly is probably going to be impacted by the others, but in theory, the best psychological routine, the best fitness routine, but if you're filling your body with edible food-like substances and things that your body can't recognize and it's wreaking metabolic stress and havoc, there's no chance you're going to be healing, and it's going to cause inflammation, which is going to make you more tired, which is going to affect your recovery. It's just a horrible cascade, and that's where a lot of people are at, I think.
And most Americans wake up tired and go to bed tired. And that's a cycle that's not easily, but it's breakable.
How do you break it?
By taking small steps, starting to change your mindset, getting coaching, doing all the environmental.
So it's a lot of mental.
Then you start building momentum.
I mean, I only sleep like 6 hours a day. So, and I Very, very rarely feel tired.
So are you like a lark or an owl? You know that there's like the chronotypes, sleep chronotypes. The kind of person who kind of likes to naturally go to bed early and then wake up early. Are you more of a?
Oh, I would love. I've been married for a long time, so I stay up and have a relationship with my wife. But I would naturally just probably go to bed at like 8 or 8:30. And it doesn't matter if I go to bed at midnight. My body is getting up at 4:30, 4:45. I mean, I'll just wake up. And sometimes on the weekend, I'm like, oh no, you need to sleep more, but I just can't do it. Can't do it.
So what's interesting, you know, we all go through seasons in life, right? And like big seasons and kind of little seasons. Like this morning was my little season that I didn't go to the gym this morning. Usually I do because I had this.
Yeah.
Wanted to make sure I was on time, all the things. My wife is having a baby in February. That's going to be a season, and I'm going to have to make adjustments based on that season. And how does that look right now? I don't know. But, you know, we always have something going on that competes with this priority.
I mean, kids, holy cow. Kids are so amazing for us as development of leaders and coaches and teachers, because the same things that we're teaching our kids, we've got to teach each other and ourselves. And so Josh, like these seasons, I'm going to say it a different way. And we've been beating around the bush the whole time, but we're not after perfection. And man, if someone listened to the first 35 minutes of our conversation, it's going to scare them away. And that, I mean, because honestly, we're not all going to look like you. Probably never.
Well, if there's no controversy, there's no growth.
But
I'm gonna try.
well, you should. I mean, so that's the whole point. Is perfection is not what we're pursuing. What we're pursuing is excellence, and excellence to me is just your best, right? And so your best may look like something different from season to season.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly day to day, your best might be a little bit different, but your best is consciously making a decision to like move forward. Just move forward.
Consistently too to that. I think like we've all had those spurts where we just amaze ourselves with like a one-off thing. Like, why did I do that? A paper. I'm thinking like, has this ever happened to you? Where you guys do something, give an interview or write a paper or a performance or something, and you look back like 5 years later, like, how did I do that?
Well, until you're,
and it's like consistently putting out output is like the challenge, right? Like everyone had to do it every once in a while, but that's always.
Well, and the reason why coaches have jobs in this world that pay good money is because sometimes to be your best, you need someone else. And I know you experience this too. In the military, when lives are at stake, it shoots right to the heart of this, what I'm about to say is you will quit on yourself, but you won't quit on others.
That's right.
You just won't. You won't quit on others. I think we're tribal animals and we're just engineered that way. And I would never, I was willing to give my life for a country that I don't know who everyone is in the country, but I will do that gladly.
I think a big part of that is humans are hardwired to be part of a group and
protect one another, provide for one another,
right.
love one another.
And if we're not consistent in our actions to be part of that group, we feel just awful, right?
Yeah. It's a great book that if you guys really short, read it in a day. It's a Sebastian Junger, the war reporter. He had the book Restrepo. He wrote a book called Tribe, about PTSD and why, trying to answer that question, like why people are like that. He talks about that. It's so well done. It makes sense.
Ranger School brought it front of mind. Like in Ranger School, I wanted to quit every day. Every single day, I was like, this isn't worth it. I mean, I told myself it didn't worth it. It's because I was there for a personal achievement. Like I didn't know the guys I was going to school with. Every single mission when I was overseas in combat, I never once thought about quitting. And I was kicking open a door where I knew somebody was going to shoot at me from the other side of that door. And not one time did I ever think like, oh, I'm going to quit. No, I mean, I think that's a big point. If you can bring someone along on the journey with you, you will make each other better.
I think one thing I've learned is really important, just with I'm sure you do this as well, like all health coaches will do this, is the underlying why. In our company, we call captivators, which is a really bad portmanteau of captivators.
Well, business calls it purpose, right?
And you have to keep going and use the Toyota 5 whys. When we first get people in, it doesn't work for business, but it works really well in healthcare. So you just keep asking why. Like, so someone will say, I want to lose weight. I'm not good enough. Like, why? Like, you want to lose fat, actually, right? You want to lose some fat, not weight, because you want to keep the muscle mass. So they're like, okay, why? Well, I got to fit in this wedding dress. Why? Well, I want to look really good at the wedding. I want to try to impress. Yeah. Well, my soon-to-be husband, my friends, why do you want to impress them? And you keep going, and you keep going, and you keep going, and you get like the real answer.
And it ends up being somebody else.
somebody else.
I'm gonna be my best for the world.
Or parents, for example, are like, I want to be a good role model for my son.
It's for your son. Yeah.
And so like when we have those moments, we notice that they're lagging behind or they're getting less motivated. I can pull that out, and remind them like, this is for your son. Like,
Totally.
Imagine if you did this today. He saw you doing it, going to train. What would he think? That's like great parent. That's what great parents do. They're like, that's true. So like, find your why.
That's awesome. So good.
Hey, so I want to ask you guys, and I want a simple answer, like a clear answer. When someone comes to you and you either look at them and they look unhealthy or are acting unhealthy, or they come to you because they are unhealthy, where do you usually start? What's the first one or two things that you ask your first one or two questions to see, is this it?
Can I start?
Sure. I know your answer.
I think we discussed this earlier, but I get that a lot, and I'm not a coach. I'm just the dude. And they'll come and be like, can you give me your program? Blah, blah, blah. What do you do? Can I do it? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to give you that. Do you drink? What? Do you eat sugar? Stop doing those things. Come back in 3 months.
All right. That's good. All right, Robbie.
First thing I say is there something that you want to change? Are you ready to make a change? Like, I know looking at them, we all, I think, know certain people. When we look at them first, we know, that person's unhealthy. Like, they're just on the road, and especially medical training. Like, that person's on the road to diabetes. Like, when like you're just trying to innovate somebody, and you're like experienced paramedic, and you just know you're like, that person's going to crash, and you just know. And like the paramedics who are training don't know yet. And they're like, how do you know? And they're like, I've seen this 1,000 times. Like, no. When someone's breathing like that, you're going to crash. So it's like that. So I can size people up pretty quick. Okay, you need to do this and this and this. But if I say that to them, it's like giving them advice. It's like it didn't come from themselves. So they have no buy-in of it. They need to know that like subconsciously almost like they're the ones who came up with the answer. So it's like this is kind of leadership lesson, or like setting up the room, even when you're coming into a room with employees, and you know what the answer is. You kind of want your employees to come up with the answer themselves so they feel like, oh, that's right.
That's so good. And I would prefer people come to you than me, because I'm giving them just the harsh reality.
No. I mean, no, I think both are valuable though. I mean, you take a coach's approach to it, which is, I'll give you the answer, but I need to know that the answer is going to be actually moved on.
They're not willing to, if they don't notice, it's like the smoker who, like, when you want, like, most smokers, I bet you 100% of smokers know it's bad for them. They know lung cancer is a risk and other cancers and everything else. So it's like me telling them that is not going to be helpful. But it's like, the first question I ask is, do you want to quit? If they say no, I'm like, okay, I'll come back to me when you feel like you do.
No, and I mean, you just got there faster. You're like, if you drink and if you eat sugar, stop doing that. And then we can build.
And then let's talk.
So it's like, but do they want to make a change? Is there something about them? It's like I take health away from the numbers. Like your
well, you know they want to make a change, but you're asking them to discover why.
It's discover why, and like what does health mean to you functionally? What does being healthy allow you to? What is it obstructing? Like I had this conversation with a smoker the other day, and she was like, "Oh, I'm trying to quit," and I'm like let's. And she's like, "Well, what's the percentage chance I'm gonna get lung cancer?" I'm like, "Let's forget about the percentages. Let's talk about what is it messing up in your day?" It's like, I don't like to be in pictures because I'm close to people. My breath smells bad. My expensive. What would you do with the money? I'd go on vacation every 2 months. I'm like, okay, let's talk about that.
There you go.
Where'd you go? And so like, there's all these things in your life that are being messed up by this addiction. And it's like, then it's like, oh, that's true. And then they kind of feel like, get rid of this. I don't know if they can optimize. And then I can start having the conversation with the tactics.
And a great point I think you're bringing out is if you give them too much too quickly, they're gonna get overwhelmed and they're gonna give up.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it sounds like perfection. It's too much. Yeah.
And it's we talked about the gap and the gain. Have you guys read that book? No. So in essence, the gap is comparing yourself to an ideal, and living in the gap is, well, I should be here, but I'm here, so I'm depressed. And the gain is comparing yourself to what you were, and saying, well, okay, I was here yesterday, but today I'm here and I'm better. I might not be at the ideal, but I'm living in the gain.
Dan Sullivan book. All right, your answer.
Well, there's two different types of people coming to our office. Some that have been in chronic pain. So my question to them is, why now? Like, why not 10 years ago? Why not 5 years ago? Why are you coming to me now? Why have you been living with this? So it's one category. The other type of people that come to us have tried everything. So these are chronic disease patients that have even been in functional medicine docs and really feel stuck.
Mm-hmm.
So in that population, I think I've hit this all day long. It's what I do. It's a nail and I have the chiropractic hammer. I'm checking the nervous system, and so we really just do this autonomia testing like right away because they've come in and they've said, I've done this and this and this and this and this. And my belief is, my experience is, and I think science supports this, is the nervous system doesn't work, nothing else does. And then we'll dive into, the rest of the 5 essentials. But
that's good. All right. I know people care about diet because diet sometimes is easier to control than exercise. If I were to say, but from a food choice standpoint, what are the 2 or 3 things that you try to control, just day to day, right? Just make it simple for them. Sugar.
I'd say to start, if you're drinking, if you eat sugar, stop doing those things. From a diet perspective, people think, oh, you must be just so healthy and you just eat all this good stuff all the time. You must be a health nut. Yeah. No, I'm not. Now, do I make good choices? Yes. Do I follow a specific diet? No. So I try not to eat processed foods. My portions are appropriate to my, my goals physically. So I probably eat more than the average bear, but I would tell people that portion control is really important. And then, eat when you're hungry and don't eat when you're not. It's really not that hard.
Yes. I think that's the really good basic stuff there. It's especially cut the toxins out. That's an easy one, right? And the highly processed sugars. So the thing with this sugar thing, I know people don't like to talk about calories, because they've had this interaction with counting calories that hasn't worked because it's hard to do if you count every single calorie. It's a little tedious. But the thing is, I'm assuming that everyone here that we're talking about, the target, wants to be at their optimal body composition.
Right.
Lean, good muscle mass, stuff like that. Not everyone has to be a power lifter or a bodybuilder, right? But we don't want to be overweight because that's what's causing all the bad juju, right? So that means we do have to be mindful of so I think about the quantity of food and the quality of food.
Yeah.
So quantity, just think about your bank account when it comes to calories. You do have to pay attention to the ins and outs. So whoever's telling you the calories in, calories out, they matter. Now the different variables of what makes the calories in, calories out happen are are you eating food that makes you full? So I eat a lot of protein. I'm sure you do.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I also tell people if they really are curious to eat more protein than they think they need.
90 grams is a flat rule for us, for everybody. Everyone should be getting more than 90 grams a day. And however you're going to get it, just get it. So the quantity of food matters.
What's 30 grams of protein look like in a meal? Because that's basically 30 grams a meal, right? If you eat 3 meals a day.
It's a sirloin, an 8 ounce.
A couple eggs, typically a scoop of your protein.
Protein powder is 5 grams right there. Yeah. Eggs are 4 grams of protein a piece. So what I say is you have to watch the quantity. Now, what makes people blow the quantity goal, the caloric goal, is these highly processed, sugar-dense, calorie-dense foods never make you full. So it's Cheetos. I love Cheetos. Honestly, I love Cheetos, right? And you eat 5, and that's a serving. But who stops at 5? Now, you try to go eat 5 steaks, you just can't. So when you look at carnivore diet and the keto diet and stuff, you look at actually what's happening there. Is there a caloric deficit, and that's why they're losing the fat? Because you can't eat that much carnivore a day. You just can't. Right. Because the protein makes you especially full.
Yep.
Protein's got 3 great things it does, right? It costs a lot more energy to actually burn it. You're burning more calories just eating protein versus carbs.
Interesting.
Or fats. It just takes. That's why we use fire, right? Humans evolved fire to help. Fire is external digestion. You see a lion, and you can eat raw meat. It'll just take you, just knock you out for 4 days. You see lions eat a meal. They're asleep for 3 days. So they're don't bother me. So anyway, that's one thing. Second thing is it slows down the gastric motility to the point where you just feel full. Kind of almost GLP-1s do, right? But you feel full, so you don't feel like eating. And they're good for all the muscle mass and stuff it's really important. So you do have to pay attention to what you're eating. But you don't have to go crazy with it. It's just a period of time, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, where you're starting to count calories, just going to get an idea, eyeing it. You'll start to train your eyes to kind of eye what's a big meal, what's not. As long as you can eat Cheetos every once in a while. I'm not a believer in these super restricted diets because you're gonna blow past it.
You're not perfect.
And life without chocolate cake's not worth it.
That's right.
You gotta have it every once in a while.
That's right.
Just make it intentional, not impulsive. So I tell people it's your quantity is your bank account. You guys track every single penny. But you kind of have an idea of where you are during the month, day to day, week to week, and you check your balance every once in a while. You do the same thing. And the good thing about quality is there's lots of quality food. The general adage is if there's more than 6 ingredients in it, or if there's something your grandmother wouldn't recognize, don't eat it consistently.
That's a good idea.
But the quality, the last thing I'll add about it, you don't need to spend a lot of money. to eat quality food. You can get frozen vegetables at HEB for like $1.30. So
Yeah.
you don't need to be shopping at Whole Foods and stuff like that. 'Cause I know right now money's tight for everybody. So that's what I would say. And the last thing is eat in a way that you can sustain. Because a lot of people try keto, they try carnivore, they try all this stuff. And they just
Yeah.
can't, like, I can't sustain keto because I can't get the protein in that I need for a day. Or
Yeah.
one meal a day or fasting. It just doesn't work for me. It's not going to work for you long term. I'm not going to stick with that. The diet that's going to work is what you should stick with.
I think your point, well, to reiterate, Americans are overfed and undernourished. Stress, especially leadership stress, makes you tend to make poor decisions and influences eating more junk. Nutrient density, I think, matters immensely because we're overfed and undernourished. I think a really important place to start is, as you just mentioned, is protein. Protein to me is the bottom of the pyramid. We're also often fat deficient of the right types of fats, and then we're missing the vitamins and minerals, right? And that's what the processed food is. It's edible food-like substances. It's overfeeding us calorically and undernourishing us. And what we see, so you have the disease markers like A1C, we have metabolic markers, and we can actually look a little bit lower to see like what is the body actually absorbing, what is it not. And when you look at the energy cycle of a cell, like the Krebs cycle, it needs key building blocks of things like magnesium and B vitamins for that whole cell cycle to even turn to produce ATP to make energy.
Mhm.
And if you have sick cells, you're going to have sick tissues, and sick tissues make sick organs. You have a sick human. And so even with our fats, and we have a lot of rancid oils in our diet and our processed foods, the cell wall is a double layer of fat, right? And so when you're eating, the fast food oils, right? It's like wrapping those cells in saran wrap. It's like you're suffocating at the cellular level. And I think if we realized that every nutrient devoid decision we made is not only starving us, but it's poisoning us, we would really make some changes. And so I like to very simply shop the periphery of the grocery store. So if you're going down aisles, I think you should think twice. I think it's okay to go down aisles, but you should be more intentional when you do go down the aisles and flip over the boxes and read and know what you're going after. I've done some research. I also really like the Environmental Working Group as there's an app you can download. It's the EWG app. So if you're just starting and you're saying, hey, I want to start pulling some of the toxins, some of the junk out of my life, and I think I just need to speak to guys, but I'm one of those guys, stubborn fathers, stubborn leaders. I see it a lot in our office where, unfortunately, it's just the way it is, and I think it should change. But the mom is trying to make health changes for the health of the kids and the family. Yeah. And the father is looking at the bank account, to your point, and saying, no, this is too expensive. We can't do that. It's not worth it. I've always eaten this way, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just going to say, as a father, as a leader, as a man in the society, we should be first to be leading our families to putting real food.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
Can I add something to that?
Please.
In terms of the leadership thing, people think, I'm just not eating that much. I don't know why I'm fat. I'm not eating that much. This is an opportunity as a leader. When you're leading a company, for example, it's like, think about the food you're putting out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing with Friday donuts?
Yes.
Is that really what the message we're trying to send? Yeah. Like the vending stuff over there, right? Like I went to the hospital the other day, and there's the hospital I interned at, Dartmouth. It's a great hospital. If anyone's watching this, it's an incredible job. You guys did an incredible job. But the point is, there's like a Sbarro's in the lobby.
Nice.
What are we doing here, right? Like this is just like a revolving door of the Sbarro's.
You know who's notorious for that are churches.
Yes, I was just
So, they'll have, the spread with pizza and candy and all this stuff. Might as well just have a keg of beer out there. It's probably better.
Well,
It's a miracle.
I wouldn't treat food as a reward. Like if you're gonna don't. It's like I like this donut. You want to make an intentional choice to have it, eat slowly, enjoy it. Be like, this is great, and you're like done with it. But like, I don't like it as like rewarding somebody. Like, oh man, you did a great job as an employee this week.
That was a great topic. So tying that in, I think another practical action step is if you eat the nutrient-dense foods first, and then decide to have a part of the donut, right? Because you can check the box and say, my body has what it needs to heal, to recover, to thrive. And the reality is you're not going to eat very many of the donuts, and you're probably not going to eat much of it if you've truly checked your macros, right? If you've truly filled your body with the nutrients that it needs. I also think water is a really important topic. We don't have to go too far down this, but we're extremely underhydrated, and we're drinking a bunch of toxic water. I think that's a real practical toxicity action.
What do you mean by toxic water?
And you could open up any news page or look at Google right now. I think, well, number one, we've got plastics and everything. We're starting to see it in the brain now, which is just not really mind blowing if you think about how much our society's changed over the last 50 years. But we also, the EWG is also just I don't know if I finished that thought. The Environmental Working Group has an app that you can download that you can take into the grocery store if you're very new to trying to learn about your products, and you can scan the barcode on those processed foods, shampoos, products, and it'll rate it on a scale and give you some feedback, and you can start learning about it and start pulling that out. You can also do the same with your water on that website, is you can look up your city's water. And what we'll find people's antibiotics, we'll find birth control, we'll find pesticides, we'll find all horrible chemicals in water. When you're taking a hot shower, you're absorbing that through your skin, and you're just toxifying yourself.